What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, what we're going to be doing is my ultimate guide on how to improve your mechanics in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3. In this video, I'll be covering all of the best ways to improve specifically your building and editing in order to become a dramatically better fighter in Fortnite, and regardless of whether your goal is to make money in tournaments, gain arena points, or even just win regular matches, this video is going to give you everything you need in order to become insane mechanically. If you do find this video helpful, then I'd appreciate it a lot if you could drop a like, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more tips and tricks content just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the Fortnite item shop if you want to help your boy out a bit extra. It's 100% free for you and it really helps out a bunch. With that said though, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So starting off today's video, you know there's no way I can talk about improving your building and editing if I don't take the time to talk about piece control. As you may or may not know by now, piece control refers to the act of controlling a fight through building and editing, and the ultimate goal is to box your opponent and clean up the fight. All in all, piece control is arguably the most important trait mechanically aside from aim that separates pro level players from regular players, and the ability to box up your opponent and take smart angles to outplay them is absolutely critical in pretty much every capacity. So when it comes to improving your piece control, I want to show you pretty much the ultimate piece control map in Fortnite, and that's going to be Raider 464's piece control practice map v3. In Raider's map, you have access to around 30 different piece control scenarios. These include regular scenarios where the goal is to box up the target and shoot them, as well as the piece control tunnels where you can basically practice building and editing in kind of like patterns that represent what you would do when you're trying to piece control someone. Overall, the map is split into 3 different sections with the regular scenarios, then the piece control tunnels, and then the basic scenarios. The basic scenarios are basically just beginner versions of the regular ones. So overall, practicing your piece control in this map will help you so much in all sorts of situations, and it's definitely one of the quickest ways to improve your mechanics, even though it's been around for quite a while. So with that said, if you haven't checked out Raider's map already, I absolutely would recommend you try it out, and I'll put the code up on screen right now. Moving on from piece control though, and the next topic I want to discuss is something that's super simple but also a fantastic way to improve your mechanics, and that's what I refer to as technique practice. As you probably know, there are all sorts of techniques and such that you can use in fights. These range from box fight peeks to high ground retakes and even piece control moves like the ones you find in Raider's map. And honestly, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that your mechanics mostly improve in Fortnite as you're exposed to different mechanical stimuli. What I mean by that is basically all the different types of movements, key combinations, and general stuff that you do during various techniques. Those things all carry over into other techniques as well as your general gameplay. I'm not sure if that makes very much sense, but the basic premise here is that learning new techniques, even if they don't necessarily seem realistic, can help you improve your overall mechanics as well. So the way to implement technique practice into your gameplay is super simple. All you've got to do is look around and find any sort of technique. As I said, this can range anywhere from a high ground retake to a box fight peek to even a piece control move. You can find techniques in multiple forms. You can watch a pro's gameplay and look for techniques that they use in fights. You can find something in a creative map such as Raiders, or you could even just watch a video about techniques. For example, I make a bunch of different videos about box fight techniques and high ground retakes which you could practice. From there, you're basically going to want to start from scratch and try to learn the technique to the best of your ability. You'll want to focus on one technique at a time and try to master all the mechanical pieces of the technique until you can basically perform it consistently, and then you rinse and repeat that process with a bunch of other ones. What this basically does is it gets you used to the mechanical intricacies and patterns of that exact technique, which can carry over into other techniques and other areas of your gameplay, not to mention the ability to actually use the technique itself, of course. So basically, what I recommend you do is each time you get on Fortnite, take 10 to 20 minutes and try to learn one new technique from scratch and rinse and repeat that, and it should help you out a bunch. Moving on to our next section though, and next up we're going to be talking about combat practice. As you might expect from the name, combat practice in Fortnite basically refers to any sort of practice that involves you and another player fighting. As fantastic as it can be to run through piece control maps and practice various techniques, none of it really does anything until you can apply it in real fights, which is where the combat practice comes in. Combat practice is essentially the way to take all the skills, strategies, and techniques you learn in creative and apply them against real players. Combat practice can involve all sorts of things, but in this video I'm going to be discussing 4 of them. Those are going to include build fights, box fights, zone wars, and regular matches. Starting off with build fights, this is a pretty simple one, but one that I find pretty much everyone should be doing. In a build fight, both you and your opponent are given infinite materials, and you're basically just building up and fighting one another in the air. What this allows you to do is perform all sorts of mechanical building and editing moves in a combat situation, and this helps you to improve your building and editing dramatically. Depending on which exact map you use, it may or may not have updated weapons for the current season. Personally, I prefer to use up-to-date weapons simply for the specificity of it, but if you're mainly focusing on improving your mechanics, then it won't be too much of a difference. Obviously, in that case, it would be perfectly fine to use something like a pump shotgun and AR. Overall though, build fights are a super simple way to practice as they only involve you and one other player, and they're a super effective way to get a ton of repetition in for your building and editing in a short amount of time. There are plenty of build fight maps out there nowadays, but I will go ahead and put the code up to one that I like quite a bit. It's a build fight map by, once again, Raider464, and it actually has matchmaking as well in case you don't have any friends. Or if you'd prefer to actually know the person you're playing against ahead of time, then feel free to find someone to 1v1 in my Discord server, which is going to be linked down in the description as well. Moving on from build fights though, next up we're going to be going over pretty much the close range version of build fights, which are box fights. Box fights are also pretty self-explanatory. They're in super close range, you and an opponent, and your goal is basically to get the best peaks and angles to outplay them and get the kill. These are typically closed into something like a box, which keeps the fight confined to close range and basically makes everyone's life easier. Obviously, if you're doing it in the open, then someone might just start building up and 90ing and everything just gets out of control really fast. So with that said, if you find yourself struggling with peaks and close range fights in general, then box fights can be a fantastic option. And I'll go ahead and put the code up on screen to pretty much the most popular one out of these maps, which is the Clicks box fight map. Onto our third combat practice variation though, and this is going to be Zone Wars. The main reason I like Zone Wars so much for practicing your mechanics is because, as opposed to the 1v1 variations like build fights and box fights, Zone Wars actually puts you up against a ton of different players, and it requires you to fight and utilize your mechanics in a much more high pressure environment. The environment's pretty similar to something you'd see in like an endgame in scrims or tournaments. Even if you're not a competitive player, Zone Wars still make it really easy to practice your mechanics under pressure and are really good for situations in game where you're around a lot of players and trying to fight your way through. And these skills also carry over really well to fights in game modes like duos and trios, simply because you're fighting multiple players at a time. So with that said, I'm putting up a code to an awesome Zone War map, which I find to be the most popular one, where you can basically instantly get into a lobby with 32 players. It's a fantastic option to improve your overall mechanics, and especially applicable for both team modes and competitive games as well. And getting into our last variation of combat practice for your mechanics, and this one's going to be a classic, which is simply regular games. Honestly, as much as creative practice can be amazing for mechanical improvement, and I recommend it a ton, and honestly most of your raw mechanical skill will probably be gained through creative, you also don't want to blow off the actual game in favor of it. When it comes to improving at Fortnite and winning fights in real games, there's really nothing more specific and realistic than playing the real game, whether that's public matches, arena, scrims, or tournaments. Playing in the most realistic possible environment against players is simply the fastest way to apply your skills into real fights, and I'll honestly just get practice in general. So I recommend you try to find a healthy balance between grinding the real game to practice your mechanics and grinding creative methods to improve your mechanics. If you can do a fair mix of both of those things, being efficient with your creative practice and then applying the things that you practice into real games, you're going to be on the fast track to becoming a mechanical beast in Fortnite. With all that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on how to improve your mechanics fast in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3. Overall, by practicing your piece control consistently, utilizing technique practice to increase your skill set, and then using various combat practice methods to target specific areas of your mechanical skill, you should be well on your way to improving your mechanics fast and performing better overall in Fortnite. If this video helped you out, then be sure to drop a like on it and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. And lastly, if you want to help your boy out a bit extra, then consider using code Teckoh in the Fortnite item shop, as it's 100% free and it really does help me out a ton. With that said though, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.